The moment I heard the words, it felt like the entire world just went quiet. We were at a wedding, and my wife, Lisa, leaned over to her friend, Amanda, in the middle of a father-daughter dance. The music was so loud you'd think no one could hear anything, but the sound traveled just right. That's when my world cracked. She whispered it so softly, with a touch of sadness in her voice. If I could do it again, I'd still pick Marcus over him. Marcus, the ex-boyfriend she'd dated for 3 years before me. My heart just stopped. I was barely a few feet away, close enough to hear every single word. I felt this strange emptiness, a kind of gut punch that didn't hurt. It just felt cold. I didn't react. I kept my face blank, finished the drink in my hand, and smiled. The rest of the night was like a bizarre dream. We danced, we drank, we laughed, and she played the role of the perfect wife, all while those 7 words echoed in my head. The next morning, the words were still ringing in my ears. I couldn't just forget them, but I couldn't confront her either. I needed to know for sure, so I decided to run a test. As we were having coffee, I said, "You know, that wedding yesterday got me thinking about our own wedding day. It was beautiful." She smiled. "Yeah, it was, but ours was better." I pushed a little further, trying to keep my voice casual. "Really? You don't have any regrets about how things turned out?" She looked at me funny, like she couldn't even grasp the question. "Regrets? Like what?" I just shrugged. "I don't know. Different choices. Different people." That's when she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, looking me right in the eyes. Of course not. I married exactly who I was supposed to marry. The lie came so easily, so smoothly. It was a complete performance. She didn't hesitate for a second. That's when I knew. The wedding whisper wasn't a mistake. It was the truth. It was a truth she'd been living with for who knows how long, and she was willing to lie right to my face to protect it. It was then that I decided I wasn't going to live in that lie anymore. I just had to figure out how to get to the truth. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to things I'd always ignored. The way she was always on her phone, how her conversations with Amanda had gotten more frequent and secretive, and how she seemed so distracted even when we were talking. I decided I needed to get more information, to hear the unedited truth. When she told me Amanda was coming over for a girls' night, I saw my chance. "Sounds fun," I said. "You two should have some privacy. I'll just catch up on some work in the garage." She was so casual about it, not realizing I was setting a trap. Our house, it turns out, was built with pretty flimsy walls. The previous owner had cut corners, and sound traveled easily between the kitchen and the garage workshop. I discovered this years ago when our neighbor's dog kept me awake. That night, I made sure my laptop was set up in the garage and that the coast was clear. As the wine started to flow, their chatter grew louder. At first, it was just small talk, the usual stuff about work and friends. But then Amanda, her voice getting lower and more serious, steered the conversation. "So, how are things with you and David?" she asked. My wife sighed. "Fine. Same as always." Amanda pressed on. "That doesn't sound very enthusiastic." That's when it all came pouring out. "It's not that there's anything wrong. David's a good husband. He's responsible. He treats me well. He's stable." And then came the line that made my stomach churn. "But sometimes I wonder if stable is enough. What if it was never really there to begin with?" Amanda was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" she asked. My wife's voice grew softer, as if she were talking to herself. "What if I married David for the wrong reasons? What if I chose him because he was safe, not because I couldn't imagine my life without him?" The silence that followed was deafening. I heard Amanda's quiet voice. "Are you thinking about someone else?" My wife didn't answer right away. Then, sometimes I think about Marcus, about what might have happened if his parents hadn't interfered. It was a full-blown confession, right there in my own garage. She wasn't just having second thoughts. She was still in love with her ex. The wedding whisper wasn't a moment of nostalgia. It was the absolute truth, and I had just heard her admit it to her best friend. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Tom. I'd worked with him before on business contracts, and I trusted him completely. Tom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need to ask about divorce procedures. Hypothetically, he didn't even flinch. Nothing's hypothetical when you're asking your lawyer about divorce. What's the situation? I gave him the abridged version. My wife was emotionally checked out, still in love with her ex. Do you have any evidence of this? He asked. I explained I'd overheard a conversation. That's tricky, he said. Overheard conversations can be complicated in court. He advised me to try and get her to admit it directly. He also recommended a no-fault divorce if she was willing to cooperate. Over the next month, I went through the motions of being a husband, but I was also preparing for the end. I quietly organized our financial records, started moving money to a separate account, and made copies of every important document. I gave her plenty of chances to be honest. I asked if she was happy, suggested marriage counseling, and even proposed a romantic weekend trip. Every single time, she gave me the same superficial reassurances. She kept up the lie, and I kept preparing for the truth to finally break through. The break came in early November, but not from my wife. It came from her friend, Amanda. Lisa had told me that Amanda was having a casual dinner party with a few couples. What I didn't know was that Amanda had been growing uncomfortable with Lisa's confessions. The girls' nights had become therapy sessions where Lisa just dumped her misery on Amanda, and Amanda was tired of being caught in the middle. Steve, Amanda's husband, told me later that Amanda felt guilty. She liked me and thought I was a good guy, and she felt like she was a part of this lie. When Lisa started talking about reaching out to Marcus on social media, Amanda had decided enough was enough. The dinner party was an intervention. She'd invited other couples, thinking the group setting would force my wife to be honest. About halfway through the meal, Amanda started her plan. She steered the conversation toward marriage and honesty. How do you handle it? She asked the table. When your spouse isn't being completely honest about their feelings? The other couples gave their standard advice about communication and trust. Then Amanda looked at Lisa. What about you, Lisa? Do you think spouses should share their doubts about the marriage? My wife shifted uncomfortably. I think there's a difference between sharing concerns and just dumping every negative thought on your partner. But Amanda pressed on. What if those thoughts are about the fundamental relationship? My wife's face went white. Amanda, what are you getting at? Amanda took a deep breath, and the table went dead quiet. I'm getting at the fact that you've spent the last 2 months telling me you're unhappy in your marriage and wish you'd made different choices. And I think David deserves to know that. Lisa's face was a mixture of panic and betrayal. Amanda, don't. But Amanda wasn't backing down. I'm sorry, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine when you've told me repeatedly that you think you married the wrong person. The entire room was staring at us. My wife tried to deny it, but Amanda just kept going. Because 3 weeks ago, you told me you were thinking about reaching out to Marcus on Facebook. That's when Amanda looked directly at me. David, Lisa has been telling me for weeks that she thinks she made a mistake marrying you. She says you're a good man, but you're not the love of her life. My wife stood up abruptly, tears starting to flow. Stop. Just stop. But Amanda was on a mission. I won't stop because this isn't fair to anyone. David deserves to know the truth, and you deserve to stop living a lie. My wife looked at me, her eyes pleading. David, she's exaggerating. Yes, I've had some doubts, but every married person has doubts sometimes. I kept my voice quiet, almost a whisper. Doubts about whether you married the right person? She started to answer, then stopped. She looked at all the staring faces, then back at me. I don't know how to answer that. Sure you do, I said. It's a yes or no question. She sat down, crying harder now. Yes, she whispered. Yes, sometimes I wonder if I married the right person. I didn't have to ask about Marcus again. We all knew. I leaned back in my chair. I appreciate you being honest. Finally. But I can't stay married to someone who wishes they'd married someone else. That night, after the most awkward goodbyes in the history of dinner parties, we drove home in silence. When we got to the house, My wife went straight to the living room and just curled up on the couch, still crying. I poured myself a drink and sat across from her. "How long have you felt this way?" I asked. She didn't look up. "I don't know. Maybe always a little bit." She said it got worse after my cousin's wedding, after she saw him and his new wife, how they looked at each other. It made me realize what was missing between us. The whole conversation was just a series of quiet confessions. We finally said what had been unsaid for years. She apologized, and I told her that while I appreciated the honesty, it was too late. I couldn't work on a marriage with someone who felt like I was a mistake. We both knew there was no coming back from it. So we got divorced. It was straightforward. She didn't contest anything. We split everything, and the entire process took 4 months. I heard through mutual friends that she did reach out to Marcus after our divorce was final. Reports claim he was married with kids and didn't have any interest in her. She moved to another city, and that was that. A few months later, I went to dinner with Amanda and Steve. Amanda apologized, saying the dinner party was too dramatic. "Maybe," I said, "but it worked." I told her she was right to intervene, that I deserved to know the truth, and my wife never would have told me on her own. Steve raised a glass to messy friends who tell the truth when it matters. To moving on, I replied. 6 months after that, I met Jennifer. She was recently divorced, too, with 2 kids and no interest in living a lie. We took things slow, but from the first conversation, I could feel the difference. She looked at me the way someone looks at their first choice, not their safe choice. And that was all I needed to know.